So we will start first how to pronounce properly. That's one of the joys. If you don't pronounce, it doesn't bring you any sin, but it's a joy to do it, learn. There are two types of verses here. One type is called mostly, 95% of it is, I would say 98% of it is called Anushtup Chanda. Chanda means meter. Sanskrit meter is called Chandas. So 95% or even more is what we call Anushtup, which means there is a verse, it is divided into 4 parts, and each part will have 8 syllables. So 8 into 4, how many? 32. This is the simplest. There are certain verses which are in a different meter of different length. First we will practice it. You see, does it start with Parthaya?
Yes.
Okay. Parthaya, then 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 7 is a little bit difficult. Then 8. Let us practice it with, let us say, I'm just thinking, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th. Let us practice 2nd, 3rd, 4th and 5th. Then slowly we will improve in coming classes. It goes like this. Om Namostu te Vyasa Vishala Buddhe Phullara Vindayata Patra Netra Yena Tvaya Bharata Taila Purna Prajvalito Gnanamaya Pradipaha. I will first chant, then try to follow if it is possible. Prapanna Parijataya Totra Vetraika Panaye Gnanamudraya Krishnaya Gita Duhe Namaha. Sarvopanishado Gavo Dogdha Gopalanandana Partho Vatsa Sudhir Bhokta Dugdham Gitamritam Mahat Vasudeva Sutam Devam Kamsa Chanuramardanam Devaki Paramanandam Krishnam Vande Jagadgurum. Let us practice this 5th one 2-3 times. Do you want to hear once more, or can you join me? Vasudeva Sutam Devam Kamsa Chanuramardanam Devaki Paramanandam Krishnam Vande Jagadgurum. Again. Vasudeva Sutam Devam Kamsa Chanuramardanam Devaki Paramanandam Krishnam Vande Jagadgurum. Again. Vasudeva Sutam Devam Kamsa Chanuramardanam Devaki Paramanandam Krishnam Vande Jagadgurum. So now let us start with second one. Not second, third. Third, fourth and 5th. We'll say. Prapanna Parijataya Totra Vetraika Panaye Gnanamudraya Krishnaya Gita Duhe Namaha. Can you join? Prapanna Parijataya स्तोत्रवेत्रैकपाणये ज्ञानमुद्राय कृष्णाय गीतामृतदुहे नमः। प्रपन्नपारिजाताय स्तोत्रवेत्रैकपाणये ज्ञानमुद्राय कृष्णाय गीतामृतदुहे नमः। Continue in 4. सर्वोपनिषदो गावो दोग्धा गोपालनन्दनः पार्थो वत्सः सुधीर्भोक्ता दुग्धं गीतामृतं महत्। सर्वोपनिषदो गावो दोग्धा गोपालनन्दनः पार्थो वत्सः सुधीर्भोक्ता दुग्धं गीतामृतं महत्। सर्वोपनिषदो गावो दोग्धा गोपालनन्दनः पार्थो वत्सः सुधीर्भोक्ता दुग्धं गीतामृतं महत्। वसुदेवसुतं देवं कंसचाणूरमर्दनं देवकी परमानन्दं कृष्णं वन्दे जगद्गुरुम्. So we will practice, and those who have recorded, they can follow me. What I would like to do now, a bird's eye view of the Bhagavad Gita. Since today we are going to start Bhagavad Gita, we must have a bird's eye view, the whole essence. So I will give you one copy. One minute. Distribute one copy to each. Everyone got? Okay. So before undertaking the study of any book, secular or spiritual, if we have a bird's eye view, then it is very helpful in grasping the essence of the book. Very quick, very clear, and everything falls into place. Otherwise, if you go on studying without a bird's eye view, what happens is here something is told, something else is told, then it will take time to find out what is the connection between all these things. So this is what you look into the notes I have given you about what is Bhagavad Gita about, what is the essence of it. So first I will take at the end of, if you have noticed, at the end of every chapter, how the Bhagavad Gita ends. Iti Upanishads Brahma Vidyayam Yoga Shastre Sri Krishna Arjuna Samvade such and such Adhyaya chapter. So what is the first thing? Upanishads. That means what? Bhagavad Gita is nothing but the essence of the Upanishads. And what is Upanishad about? Brahma Vidya. What is Brahma Vidya? Vidya means knowledge. Brahma Vidya means knowledge of Brahman. Knowledge of Brahman means knowledge of truth. Knowledge of truth means knowledge of myself. So that is the first meaning. I will come back to the word Upanishad because very interesting. Then what is the last word? Yoga Shastre. Bhagavad Gitasu Upanishatsu Brahma Vidyayam Yoga Shastre. So we have already Upanishad, Brahma Vidya. What is Upanishad? Nothing but Brahma Vidya. What is Brahma Vidya? Nothing but Atma Vidya. What is Atma Vidya? The truth about reality. truth about reality. What is reality? So, do we know what is reality now? We think we know. So, it is not reality, it is not unreality, it is not reality, it is not unreality, it is seeming partial reality. It is called Maya. Many people mistranslate, misunderstand. Maya means non-existence. Unreal means non-existence. No. The word is not unreal, it is an English word. We use mithya or Maya, avidya. What does it mean? There is truth. That truth is perceived in a distorted way. It is not untruth. It is a truth, but it is perceived in a distorted way, and that creates all the problems. And it is also Yoga Shastra. The word Yoga Shastra has several meanings. One meaning is it's very practical. If any scripture is not practical, it is totally useless. It is very practical. Another meaning is yoga means we all know about 4 yogas. So what is the meaning of the word yoga? We all know about it. What is it? Huh?
Union.
Yes. Union with what? Yes. What does it mean? What does God mean? God means our own self. That means it is not even a union, it is realization that I am me. I am God. That is the meaning of yoga. Otherwise, union means what? There are several meanings are there. You put salt in water, sugar in water. It's one kind of union. But what we are talking about is, suppose there is a body of water and you put a stick. It seems now to be divided into 2. And you remove the stick. What happened? As though they were divided, as though they were united. That is not the meaning. It is only, the stick only appears to have divided. The waters appear to be divided, but never divided. That is the meaning of word yoga. What is the first meaning? We said Yoga Shastra means very practical. And Patanjali Yoga Shastra, what is it? Yoga Chitta Vritti Nirodha. Every yoga's function is only that. Remove all the mind. It is, what is the stick here? Stick is Chitta. In this word, the stick is Chitta, mind. And the Brahman appears to be divided because of Chitta into 2. What are those 2? Jivatma and Paramatma. Never divided. So you remove the Chitta and everything is gone. That is the another meaning. First meaning is very practical. Second meaning is it is practice any of the yogas. Karma yoga, bhakti yoga, jnana yoga, raja yoga.
About that, Swami. With the yogas, ought you to focus on one yoga, or does it matter if you focus on more than one yoga at a time?
Yes, you can combine. We will come to that point later on. I am just defining what is Bhagavad Gita about. How do we know? So it is there at the end of every single chapter. Bhagavad Gitasu Upanishatsu Brahma Vidyayam Yoga Shastre, then a dialogue. Sri Krishna Arjuna Samvad is a dialogue. And most of our Upanishads are dialogues. And the name of the chapter. The name of the first chapter. What is it? Vishada Yoga. So we will come to that point later on. So what is Bhagavad Gita about? That which reveals the truth about one's own self, that is the all Bhagavad Gita is about. Clear? What is it? That which reveals the truth. and it's a practical thing. The whole Bhagavad Gita is only just practical. Second, it is one of the Prasthanatraya. Bhagavad Gita is one of the three foundational scriptures of Vedanta or Hinduism. Three foundational scriptures. That is why it is called Prasthana Traya. Traya means three. What is Prasthana? That which sthana means a place. Prasthana means that which takes us to the highest abode is called Prasthana. Of these Prasthanas, three we said, Upanishads, Brahmasutras and Bhagavad Gita. Upanishads is called Shruti Prasthana. Brahmasutras is called Nyaya Prasthana. And Gita is called Smriti Prasthana. Smriti, do you know the difference between Shruti and Smriti? Shruti means revealed, direct revelation from God. Smriti means after hearing from someone who had heard this revelation from a person who directly experienced the truth, Shruti. We will explore the deeper meaning later on. What is Shruti? Very important. But here there are some people who realized the truth. Then they expressed their experience. Someone else heard from them, usually their disciples, devotees, and taking their words as truth based upon their faith in the person from whom they have heard, they have formulated certain other scriptures. Simple example, Shankaracharya. Millions. Shankaracharya, what did Shankaracharya do? He did not write Bhagavad Gita. He had faith in the Bhagavad Gita. And then he commented upon it. So that commentary itself is a Smriti. Smriti means secondary scripture. Shruti means direct revelation. Anything based upon direct revelation is called Smriti. So this is called Smriti Prasthana. Other things we will talk about later on. So this is a book about truth. Naturally the question comes, it teaches Brahma Vidya, self-knowledge. Why do you want Brahman knowledge? Is not life going on merrily without studying Bhagavad Gita? It goes on. But then there is a problem. What is the problem? Samsara is a problem. So the first chapter is very relevant. What is relevant? Before that I will quote you something. See, what is philosophy? Do you know what is philosophy? Philosophy is a search for a black cat in a dark room long after it had fled. This is about Western philosophy, called also speculative philosophy. Indian philosophy is totally different. What is it called? Darshana. Darshana means what? Direct vision. Darshana means direct vision. So philosophy is a direct vision. That's why philosophy and religion in India have never become separated, which again we will discuss during our deep talks. But what it means is, a philosophy is useless if it is not a truth. And philosophy must be practical. The practical side of philosophy is called religion. And the theoretical side of religion is called philosophy. Nothing to do with speculations. Okay. So why philosophy? This was questioned in a philosophical school called Sankhya. Sankhya Yoga. Now Sankhya Yoga, there are certain authoritative books, says Tapatraya Abhighatat Jignasa. Jignasa means the deep desire, intense desire to know what? Because of tapatraya. The example is, suppose you are burning, and what is your immediate desire? How to quench the fire. Suppose you see a body of water. Deeptasiraha jalarashimiva. Deeptasira, the whole head is on fire. Jalarasi means you see a lake, a pond of water. What would be your natural instinct? To go there. That is called jignasa, the desire to know. Okay. So why the desire? When does the desire come to know? Simply can you sit and then say, now I desire to know about truth? It will not come. Unless you suffer, it will not come. That is why the very first chapter is a most relevant chapter. Had not Arjuna gone through this hellfire, he would never have surrendered to God. He would never have asked for the teaching, and he would never have got it. And we see it as we go along, that first he did not seek knowledge. He thought he had knowledge. And then what did he say? He said that I am perfectly justified in taking my own decision, in not fighting. Krishna didn't say anything. Then he got confused. Why is there is no response? Why is there is no approval? Why there is no applause? I gave such a big talk and there was nobody to applause. There must be something wrong with me. Then he understood. Then he surrendered. Surrendered means what? What is the meaning of surrender? I want to know. The meaning of surrender is I am dying to be rescued. That is called surrender. Nicely after nice breakfast I surrender myself to you is not going to work. So what is the point we are making? Philosophy comes because of deep misery, suffering from three sources. What are those three sources? Tapatraya we call it. That's why when we say Shanti, how many times we say? Why 3 times? Because one peace from one side is not going to solve the problem. Because I am burning from 3 ways. The body is burning, the mind is burning, and my soul is also burning. These are 3 separate issues again. Beautiful analysis. Gross body, subtle body, and causal body. So there is a physical body, there is a subtle body, and there is a spirit body. We will come to that. So when there is so much suffering, the next question, that question is, can you not find remedy in this world? So you can find the remedy, but it has 2 defects. And if it is a partial remedy, it is a temporary remedy. Partial means if there is it relieves in some part, then the other part is burning. And it is only for a short time. There is no complete and permanent remedy. Only philosophy can give complete and permanent remedy. So that is the point here. That Vishada. Vishada means what? Grief. So why does Vishada come and how long does it stay? I am talking, every religion tells it, but I am talking especially from Vedantic point of view. This world is another name for suffering. That's why it is called samsari. Samsari. A person who is in samsara is called samsari. He wants to be samsari and doesn't want to have any sorry. The nature of this world, what is the nature of this world? Change. That's why the very Sanskrit words, 2 words I will give you. Samsara is 1 word. You know what is the meaning of samsara? That which is constantly fluctuating, changing, flowing is called samsarati. That's why saras. Dhyaet chitta sarojastham. Holy Mother's Dhyana, meditation mantra. Dhyayen chitta. Saroja means lotus. Saras ja means born. What it means? Sara. What is Sara? That which is always flowing, a stream, a water, body of water, a river, everything. Water is flowing. That's one word. Samsara, always changing. What is the second word? Jagat. Jagat means what? Gati. Gati means what? Movement. Constant movement. That is the name of the world. And also another word is there, prapancha. Prapancha means what? Made up of 5 elements. But what is the nature? Constant change. So, Vishada. What is Vishada? What is misery? That which never stays steady, but always changing. It is a source of misery. That means what is that? Insecurity. One way of describing it, though it is very light way of describing it, is, suppose there is a round ball. Try to stand steadily on it, or stand on a bicycle without any stand. What happens? You will have to constantly balance, isn't it? You will have to make balance. And by the way, yoga also means balance. Okay, what is the point we are discussing? Anything that never remains unchanging is a source of insecurity. Insecurity. This is a wonderful point. Again, we will discuss it later on. What is the meaning? So long as we are identified with the body and mind, and body and mind is another name for the world, so long there would be suffering. That is why it is called Shad Urmi. Shad Urmi, 6 changes. What are the 6 changes? Conception, steadiness, birth, growth, old age, disease, death. So everybody, everything in this world, sooner or later, it has to go through this. And that is the cause of misery. We want something of which we say, I am secure. There is no security here. 2 problems we say, insecurity and incompleteness. Insecurity and incompleteness. So, these can spring and would spring like Murphy's law from 3 sources. What are those sources? Body, mind and spirit. Or another way of saying, from my body, from the external world, from God's. Adhyatmika, Adi Bhautika, Adi Daivika. 3 sources. So, what is the remedy? Remedy is to find out that which never changes. And what is it that never changes? Atman. Because it is never born. So therefore it will never change. That which is not born means it doesn't go through these 6 changes. That means it is complete and it is secure. That is the only thing that is secure and complete is what? Atman, Brahman. So we want to be free. Freedom from 3 tapas, sufferings, sources of suffering, is called mukti. You heard the word mukti? Mukti, moksha, liberation, all these are synonymous terms. So, every human being, every living creature in fact, but consciously a human being, he wants only 2 things in this life, after life, in this world. How many? 2 things. I want to interact, you have to say yes, 2 things. Because that will, not for my sake, for your sake, it will reinforce. What are those things? Dukkha nivritti, paramananda prapti. Destruction of dukkha. Dukkha, you understand? Misery, suffering, dukkha, and parama ananda prapti, attainment of complete happiness, eternal happiness, infinite and eternal happiness. Why two words? Infinite means what? Complete happiness. Eternal means what? For all time. And that is the nature of Brahman. That is why another way of putting it is defining God. In a way of speaking, God cannot be defined really, but in a way of defining for our sake. Sat, Chit and Sat means what? I don't want to die. Chit means what? I don't want to be ignorant of my existence. Ananda means what? I want to be infinitely and eternally happy. That is God. That means I want to be God. That is why Swami Vivekananda says each soul is potentially divine. Here is an important law, factor. That which is our nature, we don't struggle to get out. That which is not our nature, instantaneously, instinctively, naturally, even unconsciously, we want to get out. What is that? If we are unhappy, do you struggle or not? A mosquito is biting. What will you do? Okay, I will deal with it 2 days later. Will you say that? Unconsciously, even in your deep sleep, if a mosquito sits there, you are trying to kill it or scratch it or do whatever you want. What is the law? Whatever is our nature, we don't want to get out of. What is not our nature, we want to get out. Now what is the point here? The point is, if we are trying to get out, reverse this nature, this law. If we are trying to get out of something all the time, that means we are living in our nature or in some other nature. Some other nature. What is that? That is called anatma. Anatma. Okay, this leads us into a very deep concept. In this whole universe, if you are asked, how many things are there? How many things are there? Infinite. Almost infinite. Not infinite, but almost. Means uncountable. But according to Vedanta, there are only two things. What is it? Atma and Anatma. Self and everything else. Self and everything else. Truth and everything else. Reality and everything else. Okay? So, Tapatraya Vighatat Jignasa. What is the Bhagavad Gita about? It's about how to get out of our non-nature with which we are identified now and how to be permanently established in our true nature. Call it Brahma Prapti or whatever it is about. So, Gita shows us the way. The whole Gita, not only Gita, Gospel, complete works, any scripture, Bible, Quran, Tipitaka, what is it going to show? How to get out of what is not our nature. So they don't put it that way, because we will discuss it again later on. They don't put it that way because only Advaita Vedanta tells the whole world is non-self. Whereas dualists and qualified non-dualists, what do they say? It is a real creation of God. So if it is a real creation of God, there is no way you can deny it. And yet they pose, you will have to go to God, and it has nothing to do with His creation. The essence is get out of the creation, prapancha. That's what he is saying. So Gita shows out the way. What does it show us? Upanishads, Brahma Vidya, Yoga Shastra. Now, a little talk about Upanishad. You all heard about Upanishads, you heard about Upanishads, you read about Upanishads, You heard about Upanishad. What does that mean? See, I want you to interact with me so that you will understand it better. You heard about Upanishad. What's your idea about one or two of you? What does Upanishad mean?
Does it not mean to destroy delusion?
Yeah, but I'm talking about a precise meaning. I'm not talking about the summary.
Okay.
I'm talking about the very word Upanishad. Okay, the word Upanishad is divided into three. Upa, Ni, Sat. When in Sanskrit grammar, I won't go into it, bore you with it. When Ni plus Sat join together, according to Sanskrit Sandhi rules, Sa becomes Sha. Is actually Sad. Sad, not Sat, Sad. So, Ni Sad becomes Nishad. Upa Ni Shad. Okay, what does Upa means what? Near. Upa means near. Upavasa, live near. Upa asana, sit near. Very wonderful word. What does the Upanishad do? It takes us nearer. Nearer whom? Nearer to who is the nearest to us? There is nothing nearer to us than self. Therefore, that knowledge which takes us to our own, nearest to ours. Nearest means not sitting side by side. Nearest means to be only oneself. That is Upanishadic knowledge. The knowledge which it takes us. So, the other meaning, three meanings are given. Very simple translation is Sad means that which loosens the bondage, that which totally burns the bondage, and that which takes us nearest to God. And here nearest not in a physiological sense. Nearest means you become one with God. But how does it do it? It doesn't take you. The analogy of a stick on water. So what does the Upanishad do? He simply takes away the stick. Then you get unstuck. When stick is removed, you become unstuck. And you realize, oh, I thought I was somebody else. Now I know who I am. That is the meaning of the Upanishad. What is Bhagavad Gita? The essence of the Upanishad. How do we know? We will explore it. Sarvo Upanishado Gavo. All the Upanishads are compared to many cows. Why many cows? I'll make a little bit fun now and then. Why many cows? Because they are not England's Jersey cows. They are Indian Nachiketa's father's cow. So they will give little milk. So there are so many Upanishads. Therefore, the essence of all those Upanishads is brought out in the Bhagavad Gita. And Bhagavad Gita is also very difficult scripture. But if you cannot understand Bhagavad Gita, then you read the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna. What is the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna? It is the commentary on Bhagavad Gita. So what we are going to do, study this Bhagavad Gita in the light of the teachings of Sri Ramakrishna, Holy Mother and Swami Vivekananda and other direct disciples. Okay? Right. So what does Gita do? It shows us the way. How does it show us the way? How does it show? What does a yoga do? I want to dispel some wrong idea about the meaning of the word yoga. One meaning is union. It gives immediately you are separate from something and this path is going to take you and unite you with something. But in Vedantic terminology, yoga means viyoga. Just the opposite. It doesn't take you to God. It disintegrates that glue which separates you from God. Destroys ignorance. The purpose of every yoga is to destroy the, what is the obstruction we said? Chitta. So the chitta is first purified, then concentrated, then it is destroyed. When the mind is destroyed, what remains? Just imagine, in deep sleep what happens? There is no mind. So what happens? You have no problem. There is no Gita class there, no gospel class there, no Sunday class there, no doing japa business there, as well as no eating, no drinking, nothing business is there. You are perfectly alone and you are very happy, very secure. But consciously we attain to that state. So how does Gita do it? That's where Sri Ramakrishna comes to our. There are literally thousands of commentaries, from small to big. Of all these commentaries, Sri Ramakrishna's commentary is the shortest. What is the commentary? What is the essence of Gita? Thagi. And what Thagi means what? Renunciation. Tyaga. Tyagi means what? Tyaga. Tyaga means what? Renunciation. Renouncing what? Renouncing what? Only one thing. Renounce ignorance. Renounce ignorance. This is what Sri Ramakrishna meant. You become a monk and you become nun. Then you see, what did you renounce? Can you become a monk or nun just from where you are, doing everything? Yes. Why? Because it is not outward renunciation, though some people do that. What is the renunciation? Renunciation of whatever is standing in the way of knowing who we are, and become free from this bondage. Renounce it. Renounce the bondage. That's what Sri Ramakrishna meant. That's what Bhagavad Gita meant. Here is the connection. The last verse of Bhagavad Gita. What is it? Sarva dharman parityajya. That is the key that we get. Sarva dharman means renounce all yogas, renounce all duties, renounce everything until there is nothing to renounce. If there is nothing to renounce, what remains? You, the renouncer. Do you remain the renouncer?
No.
Even the renouncership doesn't remain. Renouncership belongs to the one who is trying to renounce. When he has given up everything, can you follow what I am talking? Suppose there is a person says, I want to give away everything. So he may be a very rich person. One after the other is giving it. During the process of his giving up, what is he called?
The giver.
Giver. And once he has finished giving everything away, would he still be called a giver?
No.
He was a giver, not he is a giver. Then what remains? Simply he remains. That is what is called. What remains after everything is sarva dharman parityaj. That is also called sharanagati, the act of totally surrendering oneself to God. That's what Sri Ramakrishna said. That's what Bhagavad Gita is said. That is the relevance between these two. So what is tyaga? What is renunciation? Renounce the cause of samsara, cause of bondage. If you renounce the cause of bondage, what happens? Okay, let me put it this way. Bondage is an effect. That bondage comes because of what?
Ignorance.
Ignorance. So if you renounce the ignorance, then what remains? The bondage also goes. When the bondage goes, only the self remains, nothing else remains. That is the essence of Bhagavad Gita, which is Ramakrishna's commentary so beautifully illuminates. So, how to achieve this renunciation? Bhagavad Gita tells us 5 ways, though I have not mentioned it, but 4 yogas, You do it either through karma yoga, bhakti yoga, raja yoga, jnana yoga, by one, by more, by all of them together, and be free. So that is what Bhagavad Gita is going to show us beautifully. All the 4 yogas have been enumerated in this Bhagavad Gita. Okay. Now, yoga. 4 yogas, we said. How? Renunciation. What is the essence of Gita? Renunciation. How to achieve renunciation? Through yogas. How many yogas? 4 yogas. What is yoga? Of course, we already discussed. One definition of yoga is yoga chitta vritti nirodha. But here, what is the definition of yoga? Means when we are practicing, how do we know that we are slowly progressing in the path of yogas? Now I will ask you something very interesting. So, if I ask you, who are you? What would be? Suppose you go to some new ashrama, nobody knows about it, and Swami or whatever asks you, who are you? What would be your CV? How do you introduce yourself to them? I am a devotee. That's very fine, because we are bhakti. But suppose I ask you, you are a yogi. Would you accept that definition? I am a bhakta, very happy. I am a yogi. Are you happy to be called a yogi? Why? What is so much of the, after all, that is what we are doing through japa, meditation and other things. So how do we know we are bhaktas? Why I am coming to this point? You have objection to be called yogi, but you don't have any objection to be called as a devotee. Now who is a devotee? A devotee is none other than a yogi who is trying to become a perfect yogi through practicing a particular path. Is it not? What is that particular path? Bhakti yoga for us predominantly, but everything else is there. As a background, as a support, as an auxiliary, it is there. So, Bhagavad Gita gives 3 important definitions of yoga. Don't take chitta vritti nirodha is the highest stage. We are not talking about highest stage, but when we start practicing, what should be the condition of our mind so that we know we are slowly making way towards that. 3. What are the 3? The first definition is samatvam yoga uchyate. All from Bhagavad Gita. Samatvam. What is samatvam? Balance. What is balance? There should be balance between your sleep, your activities, your food and everything else. Samatvam is one meaning. Another meaning is whatever happens in life, keep the mind in balance. So, suppose you are very happy. Should you not be happy? Should you be like that? So, how is Rasgulla? Say, it doesn't give happiness, and second time you may not get it. Suppose it's a painful event. So, what should be done? So, the idea is you fix a balance and say, this is the middle way. You can go a little bit high, you can go a little bit low, but don't go below that and don't want to go also above it. That samatvam, equanimity of the mind, is one definition of samatvam yoga uchyate. Okay.
How do I know that going down and going up?
Because when you go up, you will be very excited. When you go down, you will be depressed. As if slight observation, or take a good mirror and look at your face. Or if nothing works, ask your wife. Yeah, don't come to me every time. Okay, what is the second definition? Yogaha karmasu kaushalam. Yogaha karmasu kaushalam. Yoga is dexterity in actions. Do you know what it means? It means, I'll have to give a slight explanation, very simple, but we will discuss it later on. We are doing karmas, and there is a law of karma. What is the law of karma? I am not talking about karma phala. Suppose there is a light switch. You press the light switch below, pull it down. That is a karma. What is the result of it? Yes. And you pull it up. What is the action? The light bulb goes off. So for every action, a totally different result comes. So dexterity in action has two meanings. One meaning is dexterity, lower meaning is not superior meaning, inferior meaning is a yogi who is steadfast, who is equanimous, who is focused. He can do any work he undertakes quicker, more efficient, and in a better way. In every way, a yogi can do, whether it is reading book, whether it is eating food, or anything he can do much better than a person whose mind is disturbed. So, dexterity means here what? Focus, use your intelligence, use your logic, rationality, and finish that work in the best possible manner. That is called kaushala. This is a lower meaning. There is a higher meaning. And that is where I gave this example. If you push the switch below and light comes on. If you push it up, I can't give this example in America. I have to give the opposite. Yeah. So you push up, light goes up. Every action has a different result. But for a yogi, whatever action he does, it gives only one result. What is that result? Going towards removing the veil. That is called yoga. So karma yoga means what? Through karma, I don't want any different result. I want only self-realization, self-knowledge, God realization, samadhi, whatever name you call it. Two meanings we give. The first meaning is to perform any action with concentration, with rationality, with intelligence, finish it very quickly and in a much better qualitative way, very efficiently. That is the lower meaning. And a yogi can do that. What is the real meaning? Convert every action into one result. If I am a bhakta, I will get more devotion. If I put on the switch, more devotion. If I put off the light, that is also more devotion. So if I serve somebody, more devotion. And if I kill somebody, more devotion. Is it true? Yes. What did Arjuna do? What was he doing in the battlefield? More efficiently. Kill. That's why when his teacher asked him in the test, so a test is to pierce the eye of a bird. And he said, what do you see? I don't see you, I don't see the tree, I don't see the branch, I don't see the bird, I see only the eye of the bird. That is called the state of yoga. How difficult it is, but that's our goal. That is why, so whether you take some incidents in Swamiji's life, take incidents in Sri Ramakrishna's life, when they do something, they can do most efficiently. Simple example, if Sri Ramakrishna wants to light up something, how many matches will he use? How many? Only one. That's because he focuses his mind. Yeah. If he does cooking, he will do the best way of cooking. Whatever he does, that is why he succeeded. How many days he took in attaining Nirvikalpa Samadhi? How many days Totapuri had taken? 40 years. How many days Sri Ramakrishna had taken? How much time he had taken? How many? Huh? Wrong information. The moment his guru told him, the only obstruction was, I can remove my mind from every thought excepting the Divine Mother. And once he succeeded in it, what happened next? He plunged himself into, and then Totapuri started wondering that I took 40 years. This man had achieved instantaneously. Why was he able to do it? Is it a miracle? Because he was a first come, first served basis, God incarnation? Because how much of preparation he had done. That's why so many incidents we will discuss in course of time. Okay.
Why
So-
Bhagavad Gita teaches violence, so?
Huh?
Why Bhagavad Gita teaches violence?
This would be for the next class. It doesn't teach well. It is a wrong opinion. Just now you heard. What is it Bhagavad Gita teaches?
I mean,
No. What did we discuss?
Vishada, Atman, that is okay, but the story goes like that. That's why I was.
No. Story doesn't. It's a wrong notion because people don't understand what Bhagavad Gita is. It is not teaching about violence. It is not teaching about anything else. It is only teaching about the self, God, nothing else.
Story, I was about to ask the story. So.
No. That story also you have to interpret it properly. That's why we will come to that later on. Okay. So what is the third definition? Two definitions we have given. What is the first definition? Samatvam. What is the second definition? Kaushalam. What is the third definition? Dukkha Sanyoga Viyogam. Even if a person is in the midst of the most imaginable suffering, he will be happiest person. Sanyoga means deep union with dukkha, but as though he is viyoga, as though he is not attached at all. One simple example is there. At Mahapurush Maharaj, he was not able to sleep. Not to speak of Sri Ramakrishna's example. He was not able to sit, he was not able to lie down because asthma. So he said, I am in great distress. And he said, I found no relief. Then I said, there is only one remedy. I will sit in meditation. And within few minutes, he totally detached himself from the body and mind. He said, my mind absolutely got what rest it had to get in that state. And when after 45 minutes or so, when his mind became conscious of the external world, he said, the physical pain also, distress has become much, much less. Now, Sri Ramakrishna case, he is totally detached. How do we know? Only one hint I will give you. So one day, he had a vision of the Mother Kali. And, Sri Ramakrishna's neck was bent. And what was his vision? Mother Kali's neck was also bent. And he asked, Mother, why is this? And what did she say? Because of yours. That means what? You and me are not separate at all. Another incident. Somebody suggested, you pray to God, to Mother. She will listen to your prayer, that she should cure you. Then he said, do I have a will of my own? Long back, I offered it at the lotus feet of the Mother. Whatever happens, it is her will. Now, very important point here. Whatever happens is whose will? Her will. If whatever happens is good or bad, who gets the credit or debit? That's we understand. But what we don't understand is, if Sri Ramakrishna is suffering, who is suffering? And if Sri Ramakrishna is enjoying, who is enjoying? That is called total. He simply can't say that when I am enjoying a sweet, I am enjoying, of course by the grace of the Divine Mother, and when I am suffering, I am suffering, that also by the will of the Divine Mother. No, because self-surrender means what? They have become totally one. And if you want to understand in a simple way, Holy Mother, one day a woman came whose son, grown-up son, died, and she started sobbing. Holy Mother started sobbing. What was Holy Mother doing? She became that old woman, and by sharing, she took away. What did she share? Did you ever question yourself? Only you say, and she took away the happiness, sadness or unhappiness of that woman. But did she give anything? She had also given a bit of her knowledge to her so that she could withstand, and that's why she became consoled and went away. Innumerable examples are there. What is the point here? The point is, even in the midst of the greatest sorrow, a person remains absolutely joyful. That's another definition of yoga. Yoga, dukkha, sanyoga, viyogam, yoga. 3 definitions. Why are we discussing these 3 definitions? Because that is how we can judge. Is my mind calm and quiet? Doesn't mean like a rock. A little bit leeway is there. Yes, you can be happy. You can also be a little bit unhappy. Only 2 constraints. What are the 2 constraints? First, it should not go too much and too much down. Only this much. And second is for a short time. How long? For a short time. The yogi doesn't go on grieving for a long time. Example, Mahaprabhu's son died. Holy Mother started weeping from 3 o'clock. It was past Arati time. Somebody came and informed. You know that incident? Then Holy Mother washed her face. Afterwards, there was no trace of grief at all. How do we know? We know because even if the greatest tragedy strikes them, for a moment, like they behave like human beings, and suppose after that they have to sit for meditation. Suppose you sit, I sit for meditation after such news come. Will I be able to do it? No. But what do you think Sri Ramakrishna does? As though nothing has happened, his mind will straight away plunge into samadhi. That means this is not touching even the fringes at all. We are far away from that, but that is our goal. So as we progress, how do we know? Take these 3 definitions. Our mind will become more equanimous. Second definition, we become more focused, more rational, more logical, and more expert. Third, even if the greatest tragedy, not only of the world, but my own. A doctor comes and tells, you are going to die in another few minutes. Or somebody comes, I am going to blow your brains. What do you think? Thank you very much. I want to go to my mother. She is waiting for me. Like Socrates. You know what happened to Socrates?
No.
You don't know?
No, I don't know.
Okay. He was sentenced to die by taking poison called hemlock. And the time has come. He asked the jailer, gaoler, so what happens, because he had seen so many people. So he went graphically described the numbness starts from the legs, and when it reaches your heart, that is the end. So Socrates is slowly describing to others. Now the numbness has come up to the ankles, up to the knees, up to the thighs, etc. Happily. Then somebody asked, how you are going to die? You are talking as though as you are describing some this. He said, you know, because I know there is a better world waiting for me there than this world I know. Unless a person is certain of that, in comparison with which this death is nothing, I am waiting for something a million times happier, then he will have no regret at all. Otherwise, to leave something which we know only, it is very difficult, even if it is a world of unhappiness. Okay. As we progress, what is the test stone? These are the 3 test stones. Whatever happens, our mind is calm, our mind is very efficient, very focused, and it is never pulled down to a great extent. It recovers very quickly. And here I want to insert something by these definitions. You know, nowadays millions of books, self-help books, power of positive thinking. Gita is the most wonderful book on power of positive thinking. There is no negative thinking at all. We will explore it, but I will specifically give an example. Example, very briefly, then we will discuss it. When Arjuna was grieving, Sri Krishna tells why he should not grieve. He gives 3 reasons. The first reason, why you should not grieve, is, O Arjuna, you are grieving for whom? Bhishma and Drona, etc. Okay. What is your problem? I am going to kill them. So, supposing you don't kill them, already they are 1 foot in the, they are not young people, they are already 1 foot in the grave. So if you don't kill also, they will be killed very soon. Nobody can stop that. Just because you don't kill, nobody kills, do you think that they are going to survive? They are going to go on. The first reason. The second reason is, if you think they are virtuous people, dharmic people, if they are dharmic people, that means they have accumulated lot of punya, you understand? Merit. By doing good deeds, they have accumulated lot of merits. And when a person dies, whether natural death or somebody kills, after death, if he had accumulated lot of merits, where do you think he will go? To heaven. So, in fact, they will thank you for sending you there, fast track. Fast track.
Like killing a mosquito.
So, second reason, this is the second reason. Third reason, he says, that if you know that they are not bodies, but they are self. But the self is never born, self is never. Right. So, which viewpoint you want to take? And then later on, he inserts a little bit. You know what he says? That before birth, creatures are in not non-existent, but in an unmanifested state. And after death, they will go back to the unmanifested state. In between, they remain visible, experienceable, manifest. So, tatraka paridevana. He says, why are you grieving? Because with you or without you, this is the nature of life, so they are going to be for some time. And this is apariharyarthe tatraka paridevana. This is not in your hands. Apariharyartha means inevitably. If this is the fate of any creature, inevitable fate means what? Nobody can change it. Then why worry about it? Beautiful reasoning. That's why power of positive thinking. Don't worry, clinic. Don't worry, clinic. Huh? A doctor had a clinic. He named it as Don't Worry Clinic. So some patient said, what is this nonsensical title, Don't Worry Clinic? What do you mean? He says, if a patient comes to me and I start treating, only 2 things will happen. Either he gets cured or he doesn't. If he gets cured, nothing to worry. And if he doesn't get cured, only 2 things will happen. Either he goes to heaven or he goes to hell. If he goes to heaven, nothing to worry. Suppose he goes to hell, he will meet lots of his old friends. Nothing to worry. After all, he will rejoin with a lot of his old cronies. Yeah. This is Bhagavad Gita belongs to that don't worry clinic. Whether you are alive, you are dead, whatever it, even if you are the greatest sinner, oh, I am the greatest sinner, you know, apichet suduracharo bhajate mam ananya bhak sadhureva samantavya. Have you read somewhere? Samyak vyavasito hi saha. Bhagavad Gita, he says, even if you are the worst of the sinners, do not worry, because this sin and merit, these are temporary things. You take refuge in me, kshipram bhavati dharmatma, instantaneously. The moment you decide, oh Lord, I have done so many things in my ignorance, I take refuge in you, that very moment his whole life is turned over. If this is not a power of positive book, I don't know. And then he says, yes, power of positiveness, but you have to work a little bit. That's why what does he say in Bhagavad Gita? Uddharet atmana atmanam na atmanam vasadev. Lift up yourself by your shoestrings. Because you have that mind, I have given you that knowledge, this opportunity, this time, and everything I have given you, you just work. How much work? Bhagavad Gita, so many quotations are there. Trayate swalpamapi dharmasya trayate mahato bhayat. Even a little bit of practice of this yoga saves you from the greatest disaster. What a beautiful word. You will never get one single, you are going to go to hell. No. Temporarily, yes. But sooner or later, you will come up. Okay. So, how does spiritual progress take place from the viewpoint of Bhagavad Gita? This overall bird's eye view. First education is dharma. You practice, become dharmic. Perform your duties to your station, to your nature, to your intelligence, to your capacity. Perform your dharma. From dharma, what results? Purification of the heart. Chitta Shuddhi. From Chitta Shuddhi results, only one result will come. When our hearts are pure, one result. Do you know what that result? Jignasa. The intense desire to become liberated, to know God. And from Jignasa, you can take any of the help of the yogas. And if you pursue with my grace, then you will reach the goal. So, this is another point that Bhagavad Gita gives is, all yogas are equal, valid, and any yoga is capable of taking one to the truth. Sarva dharma, jatomot tatopot. As many faiths, so many paths. That is what Bhagavad Gita. So what is the point here? You read Gita in the light of Sri Ramakrishna's life and teachings. You read Sri Ramakrishna's life in the light of the Bhagavad Gita. You will not find any difference. Why? Why don't you find any difference? Because he who was Rama, who was Krishna, he only teaching the same thing in the form of Ramakrishna. Same thing. Why? Because truth is one. Language differs, expression differs, but the truth doesn't differ. Then what differs? Swami Ranganathanji's titles of the eternal values for a changing society. How they have to be implemented, that methods change from time to time according to the changing times, but the truth never changes. That's what he says.
Maharaj, one question is, leading a dharmic life progresses, aids in Chitta Shuddhi.
Yeah.
But also leading a dharmic life is itself a source of happiness.
Yes.
So where does the link to having conscious awareness of your suffering or the negative connotation of suffering come and lead into the jignasa?
Well, that's a wonderful question. Very briefly, I will answer now. A person leading what is called a dharmic life, the first point is there are two sources of suffering. Two sources of suffering. What are two sources, you know? First source of suffering is by the nature of the world itself. It can be hot, it can be cold, there would be enemies. You may be a good person, there may be enemies, there would be what is called terrorists, and all those people can give trouble. Mosquitoes can give trouble, anything can give trouble. The second source is our past karma. So dharma automatically doesn't remove suffering, because dharma is a virtuous action, and virtuous actions usually give their result in future. If you are doing a virtuous action right now, don't expect to. Like that fellow, there was a fellow, he had faith in Puranas and he heard stories. If anybody goes for tapasya, austerity in a forest, Indra will send beautiful women. So he wanted beautiful women. So he went into a forest, sat down under a tree with closed eyes. After 5 minutes he was opening whether anybody has been sent. You see the point? So dharmic action slowly purifies. We are not talking about yoga. We are talking about dharmic action. Dharmic action produces merit. Meritorious action gives two results. First, it leads because he is only following scripture directed path, it slowly purifies his heart. And the second point is, as a result of punya, he might go to heaven. If he wants, if his desire is to go to heaven, then what do you think he will do? He will go to heaven. But even when he comes back, that samskara, you know, many times he did these good actions, so his that habits become very strong, and he will do more and more and more. Then as a result, a time will come when he slowly, the jignasa will come. I don't want this coming and going. I want to have permanent happiness. Now that's why he said first dharma, then chitta shuddhi, purification of the mind, that leads to inquiry, jignasa, that leads to study of Gita, study of Gospel, study of Bhagavatam, whatever, that leads to the particular yogas or a guru, and from there he will start practicing sincerely any part of the yoga, and after practicing the yoga, then he attains these three results: samatvam, kaushalam, and dukkha sanyoga viyogam. And then a day will come, it may be in this life, next life, he attains knowledge, he knows what he is and becomes liberated. That is the connection.
Yeah, but you presented it sequentially, but your pursuing the dharmic action should automatically lead to those three outcomes.
What three outcomes?
The three bench, the samatvam, karma, kaushalam.
No.
No.
That's why I am telling you. Pursuing a dharmic life does two things. Because it is a scriptural or directed life of action, it purifies the heart and he can get what we call punya. If he wants punya, he will go to higher lokas, enjoy, come back. Again he has to do the same thing. It is like credit card exhausted, he has to again top it up. But during the course of time, then slowly, because this chitta shuddhi leads to jignasa, and jignasa leads to guru or scripture, and guru gives the direction, then he practices yoga, then this is the spiritual progress we are talking about. An ordinary man, when he gets something, he is very happy. Dharmic man, when he loses something, he can be very unhappy. The only merit is he is doing good actions, good results will come. Means his life will be happier life. But he cannot avoid certain things. The nature of the world he can't change. So even if Dharmaraja is going out to call, answer the calls of nature in Panchavati, under Panchavati or Jautala, the mosquitoes will still bite him. Just because he is Dharmaraja, maybe dharmic mosquitoes might bite. I don't. Huh?
And get their own moksha.
Yes, yes. So is that point clear, or still you have doubt?
I still have some doubts. I'll ask.
Okay, we will ask later on. Let me conclude this one. So, this Bhagavad Gita has got 18 chapters, about 700 verses, and it comes in Mahabharata. And Mahabharata has got 18, how many chapters? How many parvas it is called? How many? 18. And Bhagavad Gita is considered by most people is the aphorism, and Mahabharata is its explanation, detailed explanation with stories and all those things. The essence of Mahabharata is Bhagavad Gita. From one point of view, this Bhagavad Gita by many acharyas who commented is roughly divided into 3 parts, 6 chapters each, first to 6, 7 to 12, 13 to 18. First 6 chapters is called Karma Shatka. Shatka means 6. Karma Shatka. So the next 6 chapters are called Bhakti Shatka, and the last 6 are called Gnana Shatka. Means first 6 chapters emphasize more of karma, karma yoga. Middle 6 chapters emphasize more of devotion, and the last 6 chapters emphasize more of knowledge. And it is roughly it is true, but it is not true that in the first 6 chapters nothing else is discussed. There is also devotion. There is, in fact, second chapter is full of knowledge. But third chapter, fourth chapter, fifth chapter, these are sixth chapter, they are full of karma. It is there. Roughly, it is some people divide. So ultimately, there is only one way to get rid of any misery. What is that? Sri Ramakrishna's Tyagi, Sarvadharma Parityaga, Sharanagati, self-surrender. We discussed it. Last point, very important point from the Bhagavad Gita. God's grace alone can remove ignorance. God's grace alone can remove. Why? Because the ignorance belongs to whom? Maya. Maya belongs to whom? God. That's why he says, Daivi Hesha Gunamayi Mama Maya Duratyaya Mameva E Prapadyante Mayam Etam Tarandite. This Maya is a divine consisting of 3 gunas, impossible to get rid of it by anybody excepting through my grace. And when my grace falls upon any devotee, by leading a dharmic life and prayer, what do? I give him that desire to progress, to take to yoga, become a yogi and progress in spiritual life. That is what Sri Ramakrishna confirms and says, by mother's grace alone can one progress in spiritual life. And this is also confirmed by the greatest non-dualist Shankaracharya saying in the second or third verse of Viveka Chudamani, Durlabham Trayame Vaitat Daivanugraha Hetukam Manushyatvam Mumukshatvam Mahapurusham. It is only by God's grace a person obtains 3 unobtainable things in this life: a human birth, desire for spiritual progress, and the company of spiritual people, only available by God's grace. This is what Sri Ramakrishna also tells. Without God's grace, not possible to realize God. This is the overall view. To summarize in one simple sentence, Bhagavad Gita teaches us how to know who we are, and then only we can get rid of this suffering completely and permanently. Om Vasudeva Sutam Devam Kamsachanuramardanam Devaki Paramanandam Krishnam Vande Jagadgurum.